Welcome to the Morrison Report. Hosted by Deval Morrison, sales representative for Bosley Real Estate Limited Brokerage. Ms. Morrison has co-authored the best-selling book, Success Today, with Brian Tracy, and has been interviewed on NBC, ABC, and CBS affiliates by Bob Guinea from The Bachelor. Deval, a real estate investor, has spoken to many attendees at her real estate seminars and is currently ranked in the top 5% of agents in her brokerage. Join me in welcoming your host, Deval Morrison.
Welcome to the Morrison Report. I wanted to create a podcast that would give people insights into the Toronto real estate market. You can follow me on Twitter at Deval Morrison and on Instagram as Deval Morrison, and you can like my business page on Facebook. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Today we have Tracy Cook. She's the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards with the City of Toronto. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tracy.
My pleasure, Deval.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do for the City of Toronto?
So I'm in charge of the division that is responsible for the bulk of the enforcement of our municipal bylaws. That relates to property standards issues as well as zoning issues, business licensing and regulation around the businesses that are municipally licensed, such as restaurants and tow trucks and taxis. As well, I have animal services under my portfolio. So we have 3 shelters across the city and do all the enforcement related to that, as well as sheltering animals, adoption programs, spay-neuter clinics. So we do MLS, as we call it, does a lot of very different things for the city and interacts with a lot of different members of our community.
Awesome. Can you give us an idea what your department will be doing with respect to AirBNB?
Sure. So we've been asked to work on developing recommendations for committee and council on what's happening with short-term rentals, including those and Airbnb being the more significant player in the market right now. And this is a partnership effort between ourselves and our city planning division, as well as other divisions that may have an interest, such as Toronto Building and others. So we were directed last year to undertake a comprehensive review, and we are leading that review right now. We actually had our first public consultation session last night, March 28th, and that's in addition to a number of roundtables and other things we're doing. So right now we're in the review phase, we're in the consultation portion of our work, and to understand what the public's interest is in Airbnb, whether it be people who offer their properties as hosts, people who use the service as visitors, or people who are living next door to a property that is being used on a short-term rental basis. So we're really trying to reach out and see where everybody stands, and then that'll help inform what we're going to do from here.
Awesome. That sounds great. Can you tell us a little bit about why did you and your team feel it was necessary to look at the short-term rental impact on the City of Toronto?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a couple of things. I mean, we started to get, and what, as sometimes happens, a couple of rather higher profile incidents or issues that arose. There was a property up in North York where a community was quite upset by, it was a property that was, I think, awaiting a development application of some kind, but it was sitting vacant, and the owner started using it to offer on short-term rental, and it started causing some disruption in the community. And we have another street more downtown Toronto where a number of properties had been purchased by, we believe, a common owner, and again started offering these properties for short-term rental, and large parties and noise ensued. So we had a couple of these areas where some complaints from local communities were coming up.
Right.
And then our council, through our executive committee last year, said, we understand this is something that's happening in cities all around the world. We know it's happening in Toronto. We want to understand what that means and what role the city should take or not take as it relates to this. So it was really this culmination of, changing dynamic in neighborhoods, the whole, discussions around the sharing economy more broadly, what this means opportunity-wise as well as issue-wise. And we were directed to undertake that work. So the work is underway.
Awesome. Very interesting. How are you getting feedback from the various stakeholders in this discussion?
Sure. So we're doing everything we can to get as broad consultation process as possible. So I mentioned earlier we opened up our first open public consultation last night. We had about 120 or 130 people come out to the North York Civic Center, which was fantastic. Really great mix of people, great dialogue. We have had and will continue to have some more industry-related stakeholders in smaller roundtable groups. We did have one facilitated last week by Mars Solutions Lab, where we had representatives of all stakeholders all together in a room, from the hotel industry, the hospitality industry, the real estate industry, legal, hosts, users. We had communities, condo associations. So we had a great session of about 60 people last week. As well, we've just launched yesterday a very short survey online through our website. And I can tell you more about that a little later if you like.
Okay, sure.
And again, opening up the door for anybody who has, an interest in providing some input. So we are doing in-person roundtables. And actually what's really neat, one of our next public consultations will be on April 12th.
Yeah.
And we are going to live stream it through YouTube.
Cool.
We're going to engage, and we're going to engage people hopefully through Twitter as well. So we're really trying to find a number of different mechanisms to get stakeholder and public feedback.
That sounds amazing. It's a good idea to really do that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Can you tell us, do you feel, or maybe I should say, does the hotel community in Toronto feel that they're losing out on revenue because of Airbnb?
We've been speaking with the hotel industry. We don't have numbers that support any significant loss or impact to business, though anecdotally they are saying that they are impacted. But it seems more the narrative from the hotel side is around this notion of level playing field. Not dissimilarly to what we heard when we went through the Uber debate and the taxi industry. Right. The hotel industry is saying, and actually the long-established bed and breakfast industry are saying level playing field. Right. That people are doing similar things to what they've been doing, and what does that mean from a regulation, taxation, point of view. So, the hotel industry has been very good in participating in the dialogue. They recognize that this is not something that's going away anytime soon. Right. But that there needs to be a balancing. So, I think the best people to ask on if there have been financial impacts really would be the hotel industry. But they have not put that forward as any detailed case to us yet.
Interesting. And do you have a sense of how much money you think homeowners might be making from having their places on Airbnb?
Yeah, so we don't have that data directly. Okay. Really all there is around that is what Airbnb has been putting out as far as their communications. They've had some research done, some studies. A lot of times you'll hear the narrative that, they're providing people, it's a few $1,000s a year, just helping them make ends meet. I'm sure there are those cases, but we also know there are a large volume of properties that are investment properties, second or third properties, where I'm sure people are making considerably more. Right. But we've not delved into how much money people are making, because really our interest right now is around how the lands are being used. Are they being used for the purpose they're intended to? If not, how, and how does that impact communities? What do we need to do? So we've really not been looking at how much money people are making.
Got it. That's fair. I know in Vancouver they found that Airbnb was taking away units from their sort of already tight rental market. Do you see the same kind of thing happening in Toronto, that it's making it harder for renters to find a place because there are so many places listed on Airbnb?
Right. We do know that we have an extreme housing challenge in Toronto. Right. Just globally, we have a challenging, as far as, I guess, for the real estate market, it's not a bad thing with, increasing values of properties, but people are finding it hard to find places to live anyway. Right. We certainly are hearing from some people, they believe that there is some impact from the properties transitioning to short-term rental versus long-term rental. Again, very difficult to quantify. Right. We didn't have a huge inventory of all these private owners that were offering second or third properties on a long-term rental basis. We didn't have that. We do know that we have a housing shortage. We do know that we have an affordable housing challenge.
Of course.
Yeah, and to what extent does the Airbnb phenomenon contribute to that?
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to quantify. I think there is a component there, but it's certainly something that we are going to seek to try to understand more fully.
Right.
And really, bring facts to the table as far as, is this a contributor? Is this the problem? I don't think it's big enough yet to be the big problem. But is it a contributor? Quite possibly. And to what extent can we mitigate that, or what measures can be taken to mitigate it? We still need to work on.
And how can the city, sort of do more research to find those things out? Is that even an option?
Well, we've engaged with our other partner divisions that do analysis on population trends,
mm-hmm.
are looking at census data, do housing planning. So we're hoping that there may be some indicators through all that work.
Right.
In the absence of that, it comes through the consultation work that we're doing.
Right.
And hearing from people about the impact and trying to determine what can we absolutely determine through these variety of sources. So we're certainly going to endeavor to do it, because I do believe that this particular topic, the impact Airbnb may or may not be having on the availability of long-term rentals for
right.
people, I think is going to be a significant point of discussion
right.
when this goes forward to committee and council.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
So do you think that, it's hard to say, because obviously you're still in the consultation phase and you're trying to sort of create your plans based on hearing sort of feedback and what everyone has to say. But do you think the city might end up taxing the end user or taxing, sort of the owners of the short-term rentals in the end, or having some sort of licensing service for them?
Right. So I guess on the taxation front, our council has been pretty out there, vocal as far as wanting to seek authority from the province for the city to have the ability to implement a lodging tax or a hotel tax. So I know, that is out in the public discourse around the city seeking authority to implement taxes.
Okay.
There was actually a motion that came out of council, or I think our budget committee, that talked about, if a hotel tax on registered established hotels was at 4%, should a short-term rental tax be more like 10%? And that evoked some feedback from Airbnb being one of the platforms. So that's all out in the public domain. Ultimately, the authority needs to be there for the city to consider doing it,
mm-hmm.
and then council needs to make the decision. And as far as on the licensing side, again, we're at a point right now. Licensing is a possibility, sure. I think some jurisdictions have done that. We're not there yet. We don't know if a license for the platform or a license for operators, or both or neither, or simply more of a different regulatory approach where amendments are made in the zoning bylaw. We will have to see where our research takes us and what we feel the most appropriate tools are that the city needs to utilize.
Interesting. I think I was speaking with someone in Collingwood recently, and they mentioned that in Collingwood, people do have to obtain some sort of license from the city, a yearly license that they pay for in order to be able to provide short-term rentals, and they sort of renew it, and there's some sort of inspection process. And I just kind of wondered, obviously there's many cities around the world that have been dealing with the short-term rental issue. Are there any sort of key findings or interesting things that you've heard from around the world, what other people are doing?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There's different approaches being taken all over based on the local context. Amsterdam was one early out of the gate a couple of years ago, and they've got a memorandum of understanding with Airbnb as the platform, and they've implemented a maximum on the number of days a property can be used, and some responsibilities on the platform side to monitor that or take action once they've reach that max. I think when we approach these reviews, we do look at other jurisdictions, not just what they've done. And what I find far more interesting and informative is how has it worked?
Right, of course.
And if it has not, why not, right?
Right.
Certainly people's expectations are, if rules are implemented, that the rules are enforceable. So that's part of the dialogue we're having with some of these other jurisdictions to get not just the what did you do, but what worked, what hasn't worked,